This is episode 46 of This Makes Me Happy. Welcome to This Makes Me Happy, a podcast about people and what makes them happy. I am your host, Bernardo Margulis. I'm a designer, art director, and educator, and I'm the principal of This Makes Me Happy, a design studio where I help my clients with branding and visual communications. I'm very happy to present This Makes Me Happy, the podcast, where each week I chat with a different person about what makes them happy. My guests come from all walks of life, and each of them shares their own personal happy stories. Join us every week for a unique conversation. Hello, today I'm very happy to have Ronnie Polaneczky with me. Ronnie is a Metro columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer and the Philadelphia Daily News, and you can watch her TEDx Philadelphia talk, The Power of Deliberate Listening. Ronnie, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I am well. I'm very happy that we are having this conversation. And before we go forward, is there anything else you want people to know about you?
I guess a few things. I grew up in the Philadelphia area. I am one of 9 children. We're all aging rapidly. We lost one of our tribe, which was the worst thing that ever happened to us. And we bounced back from it and have learned from it closer than ever, I think, because of it. And I care deeply about family and family ties. I'm married. My husband and I have a 20-year-old daughter who's a comedian. And I once, when I was in college, I left school for a year and a half to sing in a rock band. And then I went back and fell backward into journalism. And that's where I am today. So that's a little bit about me.
What was the band's name?
Oh, well, you know what? We were working on a name. It was just called Scott and His Friends, and I was one of Scott's friends. And so it didn't last long. But then I also sang by myself. I was a street busker. So and I did this down on South Street way before South Street sort of, really exploded into something different. And now it's been through probably 5 permutations, but I would set up my guitar case in the doorway. There was a store called Garland of Letters. I don't know if it's still there, but I know the storefront's still there, and it had very good acoustics. So for these buskers, we would, sort of compete to see who could snag that storefront first. And so I would play down there for money, and I really enjoyed it. I liked it a lot. I knew that eventually, music wasn't going to lead anywhere. I didn't have the stomach for the kind of work you would have to do to really kind of make it in music. I just didn't. And it began to feel too much like something I had to work at and be good at, as opposed to something that I just did from sort of a spontaneous, desire to just express myself. So, but I loved it. I loved it.
Is that something we can find online, or should we not even try?
Yeah, don't even try. No. There's nothing online. This predated the internet. Forget it. No, there's nothing. But it was a brief period that was really, I'm glad I did.
A few years ago, I met a woman. She was a sales associate at, I think it was Pottery Barn. And she told me that in the 80s, she had a rock band. And she told me the name, her name was Denise something. I forget what the band was called. And she's like, okay, look it up online. And I found it online. So you never know.
Oh, I know for sure.
maybe it'll come. Scott and his friends will make a comeback or not.
I think Scott may be long gone by now.
Let's switch to more cheery. A more cheery note.
Okay.
Ronnie, what makes you happy?
I've been thinking about this since I knew I was going to be on the podcast. And I think in the most broad macro sense, what makes me happy is connecting with others. So that is a very, very broad canopy. And then underneath that canopy, of course, are all the different ways that you can connect with others. So one of the things I love most about what I do as a journalist is I get to meet new people all the time. I have to connect with them. Sometimes you have to connect very intensely with people over a short period of time, and you listen to them. And then you use your voice. I use my voice as a columnist to try to help amplify the voices of people I talk to, many of whom their voices are not being heard. And there's sometimes people say with journalists, or especially with a columnist, if you take on causes, they say, oh, you give voice to the voiceless. And I always find that a little demeaning, because I think, demeaning to the people who columnists write about, because it's not that they don't have a voice. They've usually been screaming at the top of their lungs, but no one has listened. And so I think what journalists do and what columnists do is we actually listen and hear them. And I just have found over the course of my career that what people really want is to be heard and to be known. And that can happen in the field of journalism. It can happen. It can happen when you're on a bus. It happens in friendships. It happens in relationships. I think a lot of marriages and other relationships end because people start to feel lonely because they're not heard and known by this person who they're with. And that could even be that they haven't found out a way to speak, in such a way that they'll be heard, or it could be that there was someone who doesn't know how to hear. There's all kinds of things to it, but I think that's sort of the big macro thing. So what makes me happy is listening to other people. And I think that sounds a little lofty to say I think that's why I was put on this earth, but I kind of feel that, I don't always do it well, but I kind of know that nothing makes me feel happier at a very basic, deep down level.
So how did you start? You have on your TEDx, you tell the story of a story you covered when someone called you out for not fully listening. Was that the start of this process?
Yeah. I always thought that I was a good listener. In fact, I think I still have it, my report card, no kidding, from kindergarten. And my teacher was this lovely woman named Mrs. Folger. And under the notes, she said, Ronnie is such a good listener. The children all want to talk to her. She's a good listener. So I think I always got my juice from listening to other people. But I think that always made me think that, okay, so I'm really good at this. I'm a really good listener. And, you take some identity from that. And as a journalist, too, you have to be a good listener. And so I always thought I was a good listener. What got me started thinking differently was a few things. There was a church that I had belonged to, and they had this thing called Stephen Ministry. And the Stephen Ministry is you can be trained. You're not a minister. What you are is you're a lay person who you're just kind of paired up with someone in the parish who's going through some transition, and they just need a point person, just someone who will listen to them. So there was some really lovely training that got done. In how to listen, some of it I think is similar to what journalists do. You ask the questions, who, what, when, where, why, how, but also how do you be silent? How do you not project onto someone what you think they might be feeling based on what they just told you? So it's about how to really sort of be present to them. So I had gone through that kind of training, and I had been paired with a woman who I just loved. She was great. It's so that got me thinking a little bit differently about listening. And since it went well, I thought, geez, obviously I still remain excellent at this, it kind of filled me up a little. And then, I was at work, and this seminal thing that had happened was I wrote a story about this Philadelphia police officer, a woman who her son had been shot and killed during a robbery. He was her only child, and I met her at a Big Brothers Big Sisters luncheon, and she spoke, and she said that after her son died, she didn't know if she was still a mother. Are you still a mother if your child is gone? And that was so profound to me. And I went up and I spoke to her afterward, and she became a big sister to this little girl. And I thought, gosh, this is a really beautiful story. So I wrote her story for the paper just about how this woman sort of continued to be a mom after her son had died, because she was able to give all this maternal love to another child. And so the story came out, and it did really well. I mean, people were so touched by it, and it was one of those things where I just felt so good, like I got to tell this woman's story. And people called, I got emails, and then I got a voicemail from a woman who was just furious with me, furious. She says, my son was shot and killed. No one wrote about me and my grief. He was my only child. Where were you when that happened? Why didn't you tell my story? And she was so angry and so defensive. And she was very presumptuous, like as though I keep a running tab on every murder and that I selectively didn't choose her for the story that I clearly was going to do. Yeah. I mean, she had all these presumptions, and it really set me back on my heels. And, I was offended by it. I mean, I was offended by her presumption about me. That's not a nice thing to admit, but it's what happened. And so she left her number and I called her back, and she spent the first 10 minutes, just telling me exactly what she thought of me, that, I was arrogant and I was elitist and everything. And I think that because of some of my prior training, which had been pretty recent with the Stephen ministry, something was able to break through. And as she was basically insulting me, I just thought, this is a woman in so much pain. She is in so much pain, and all that, and what she was saying to me, I stopped hearing it, and I was unable to take it personally, because I just could hear that underneath all of that was just her pain. Her son was gone. And so when she finally finished up, I said to her, I really want everything you just said, but first I just want to say that I'm really, really sorry about your son. And so in that moment, I was able to hear her beyond her insults. And the effect was amazing. All of her anger went out of her, and I could almost hear her begin to cry. And she said, well, thank you. And then I said, could you tell me about your son and what was he like? And so we had this beautiful talk all about our son. And then we talked about what it is to be a mother. And it was a great, great talk. And, we hung up the phone, and I thought that's the most different kind of listening I think I've ever done, because I think, if someone had just sort of come up and made presumptions about me and started insulting me, I wouldn't necessarily turn the other cheek and go, oh, well, that's okay. I would be pretty upset. And with this, so that got me thinking, wow, I thought I was a good listener, but by responding in this new way, I kind of realized all the times in my life when I had not been a good listener. And I wanted to just sort of look into this a little more deeply. And I just started looking at what makes for good listening, what makes a good listener. And I just sort of came to a whole bunch of conclusions. I don't know if you want to hear them, but I think the biggest one is that the people who are really good, deliberate good listeners, meaning, I think there's some people who are natural good listeners. They are just empathic people. They don't take things personally. They are able to be very, very present with the person in front of them. And they are sort of, and they come by it so naturally. And I was thinking about a lot of the people I'd interviewed over the years, because I've interviewed so many people over 30 years, including lots of, people who you wouldn't necessarily hear about, smaller community leaders, neighborhood ladies, great teachers. And what they all had in common, it just seemed, is that they didn't need to be right. So they could listen in such a way that they weren't going to respond by trying to set you right. They weren't going to respond by telling you what they thought about what you just said. They weren't going to dispute the truth of what you just said if you were speaking about yourself. They did not need to be right. They would put being related ahead of being right. And the more I looked into that, the more I began to sort of really try to put the relationship before being right. And I noticed that all of my relationships started to change. My relationship, my daughter was a teenager, just entering the teen years. And those are tough times. So let me set aside my right to be right. That's what I said. We're Americans, we all have a right to be right. We have our opinions. It's protected. Our speech is protected. So we have a right to think we're right. Okay, good. But is there something beyond that? And so by letting go of being right, I was able to begin listening, so that I could begin to hear the things that being right kept me from hearing. And, So that's kind of what I concluded. This is, obviously a real thumbnail summation of what I've been looking at. But now that I've sort of, like, I look at that, I see it everywhere. I just see that the problem is that everyone needs to be right. And we're living in an age of social media where the very construct of it is, I talk about how we have this massive social engagement, right? We've got Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, we've got instant messaging. So we have all this engagement, but there are conditions that come with that is creating social estrangement. And part of it too is that so many of these mediums, there isn't the possibility to have real conversation. It's people basically making statements and then other people weighing in with statements. On Twitter, you can make a thing a favorite. On Facebook, you can give it thumbs up, whatever all those little icons are to show that to show how you have judged it. So even if we don't know it, we know that in those mediums, there's the expectation that I'm going to render a judgment. We never just listen and let it go, or even respond. So there's this expectation that what we're saying is going to be judged. And also that what we're reading, we should probably judge it. And this is all unconscious and it's everywhere. So I think it has really set us up for an unconscious expectation that, number one, we should judge. Or if we're going to put stuff out there, we have to be very conscious that we might be judged. And the judgment can be really, really harsh because there's this anonymity or at least a remove that happens with this, so that we're not in real time, face to face in our shared humanity, just having a conversation. It's online. It's going to sort of live forever out there in the ether and in the internet. So the stakes feel really high. They're really loaded. There's something also absolutely adolescent about it, because the way that we interact is the way that children would interact. And parents would say, use your inside voice, use your grown-up words. We don't talk like that. You speak with respect. So there was this, but what these new mediums have done is so many of us are reverting back to like 7th grade again. And I don't even mean that as like a casual ha-ha observation. I think it's an absolute change. So, and we're expected to make judgments. And so another thing I talk about in my TED Talk is that, in a way, we are hardwired to make judgments. It's how we function. It's how we survive. We're out in the world. You make judgments. Am I safe? What am I going to do? And especially now in the big information age, information is rolling at us 100 miles an hour. So we have to make judgments even about what we're going to look like. Or what we're going to look at rather. So it's human nature to judge. But if we want to be good listeners, we sort of have to suspend our judgment and just be with what someone is saying, because people are dying and desperate to be heard and to be known. And this thing I talk about too is that, being heard is a fundamental human right. Whole democracies are based on it. The United States, we are based on everyone has a right to be heard. We have the vote, so our voices are heard. If you're accused of a crime, we have hearings. We can go to court and state our case before we're judged guilty or innocent. We make laws. They hold hearings, so all sides are heard. So it's this fundamental bedrock of democracy. So it's not just some, la-la thing like, oh, we all need to be heard. No, this has actually been like codified in our Constitution. This is so we all want to be heard and known. We really do. But judging and being right can really keep us from hearing and knowing other people. And I think that leads to a break in connection with others. And there are now studies, in the millions of studies that show that connection is our fundamental need. It's, so we really, really fear being cut off from connection. Even if we don't know that that's what we fear, I think that's probably the basis of how and why so many people act out, they fear being cut off, or they fear that, oh, I've been disrespected. So what does that mean? That means that my connection with you has been lost, or my connection to myself and to the society has been lost. So it's all really, really fundamental. It's really fundamental. And so these days, what makes me happy is that I feel like I at least have a clue. I'm not going to say I'm a great listener, but I have a clue about what makes for good listening. And to me, a good day is when I choose more often than I don't to listen, and I choose to connect rather than to isolate, or I connect rather than isolate. And I can isolate by being right, because once I'm right, someone else has to be wrong, and then I'm not connected. So what really makes me happy is connecting with others, and it's going to take me until the day I die to get really, really good at it. But I can't think of a better endeavor for my own heart. So that is sort of my thumbnail of how I got to be doing what I've been doing.
I'm hearing a lot of back and forth between the conscious acting and unconscious, between what we're hardwired versus what we deliberately do. And you talk about deliberate listening. And as you were saying that, you corrected yourself. You said that some people do it naturally. But then you're talking about how social media is making us subconsciously revert. But then you're talking about how our social code talks about listening. And it sounds from your story that it was switching from the autopilot to the deliberate. Mm-hmm. How important do you think that deliberate aspect, that conscious aspect, is for us to be good listeners?
I think it's everything. I mean, I do. I think it's everything. I do not want to get rid of my cell phone. I like Facebook. I am going to tweet. You know what I mean? But I think what is necessary is to just be conscious of what these mediums are calling us to do. And what I found is that once I became really conscious of that, it just changed it changed how I interfaced, if that's the right word, with these mediums. Like, it changed it. It doesn't mean that sometimes I don't have a knee-jerk reaction like everybody else, but the more I do look at this, the more, I think it's a steady practice, you know. I think it's a steady practice. I think what really helps me is in the mornings now, I really try just to hold still for a good 20 minutes and just meditate in my own way, which I'm so fidgety. But if I can get to some kind of a center, then I'm aware. And then once I'm aware, I feel like I just have more options throughout my day to say, okay, do I really want to choose this, or do I want to choose that? Because, you know, meditating, I think, just makes you very, very, you know, it's a structured way of getting really, really present. So if I'm present, if I'm working on being present, if that's becoming sort of this exercise that I'm trying to do and work like a muscle, that does begin to have bleed over effect into other actions that I take, you know, where I just, it could be a little more deliberate. Choice comes back into it, you know. Now, so choice comes back in, but guess what? If I've only gotten 4 hours of sleep the night before, I'm going to be bitchy and I'm not going to choose, because what I really need to do is go to bed, you know. I have less bandwidth to listen. So, you know, so those are things that I really have to be on the lookout for. Like I know when I have, you know, like if I'm getting really short tempered with my husband and stuff, the best thing he could do is say, you know, you're really short with me. I'm trying to say something and you're doing, you know, A, B, or C. And oftentimes what I'll say is, you're right. I need to go to bed, because I realize that in that moment, I'm so tired. I just want him to finish it up. So I want him to finish saying what he needs to say so I can go to bed. So tired for me that'll just send my listening spiraling into a pit. But I think it's a thing that can just be worked on and developed. And once you know, like once you have a clue, it's like, okay, well, let me, you know, here's another thing I can try, you know? So it's a way, I guess, to work on self-awareness, and then you work on choice. And, you know, it can also be humbling to find, wow, I don't often choose to let go of being right. how about me? Maybe I want to work on that. It's been a really interesting practice. And really like eye-opening, because it feels like it's kind of the bedrock of everything for me. And I'm still a novice, at it. So
have you looked into, or have you thought about those people that can do it naturally, that are fortunate enough that don't have to consciously get there?
Yeah, I think that they are otherworldly. My mother, God bless her, 9 children, was honestly the most sweet, selfless, very spiritual, but from a very simple place. Like, she wasn't an intellect in a big way, meaning she wasn't, she graduated from high school. But she didn't read up on matters of spirituality or how to be a good listener. She just had the most natural, I don't know that I ever heard her say a deliberate crossword in my life. I don't, like she would, if we would all be fighting like dogs, like cats and dogs, she would yell. The thing that I loved about her, she like when we were fighting, because if you can imagine, you have 9 children between the ages of, 1 and 15. It's going to get loud. And she would just get so frustrated. She would say, "You kids are going to love each other if I have to beat it into you." And she didn't hear the irony of that. And we would die. We would just die laughing. We're like, "Mom, how can you love someone if you're being beaten?" And she's like, "You know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying." And I think she maybe came by it in a way. My mom was raised in an orphanage. Her mother was married, had 2 sons. She was widowed. She remarried, had 2 daughters, including my mom, and then she was widowed again. So my mother was 3 when her father died, and her mother had to go out into the workplace, and it was a rough world. It was like right during or after very soon after the Depression. And her mother was not able to take care of her 2 younger daughters. They were 3 and 5 years old. And her sons were old enough that they could, they were still young. They were 12 and 13, but they could come home from school and, take care of themselves. So their mother put them in this home for girls. And so my mother was there with some girls who had been orphaned, but others were also children who, whose parents were having a rough time. So my mother she lived in this orphanage for about 10 years. And she and her sister, and my mother would talk about those years and just say how sweet the nuns were. And she loved being in this huge dormitory with 100 girls. But she missed her mom and she missed her brothers. And, she would still see them because it was all in Philadelphia, But I think that gave her a very early and deep appreciation for what is necessary in life. And she would just say things like, if we have each other, what else do we need? Oh my gosh, we have our health. Isn't that great? On really cold days, she would stand in the middle of the living room with this blissful look on her face. And she'd say, "Isn't it great to have heat? Isn't this wonderful?" And we would just look at her like, "Mom, of course we have heat. What? But she had really known some real privation. The gift of it, and I think this is because of just, she had a saintly spirit, was that it did not make her bitter. It made her grateful. And she just never felt like there was anything to prove to anyone. She had this wonderful husband and these 9 children who she thought that we were the best things ever. I think gratitude is what really underpins happiness. Gratitude's big, I know what makes me happy is when I can stay grateful, in different moments. If I'm frustrated, just say, it'll be snowing outside. I come in the house, I am dripping wet, and I'll come in and the house is warm, and instead of thinking, "Oh God, I'm tracking like stuff all over the floors, I have to get a mop and clean it up," I would just go, "How lucky am I to have a home?" Think of the people out there who don't have a home on this bitter, bitter cold night. And suddenly the fact that the wood floors are wet, give a crap. I go get a mop. It's fine. So I think that if you can really nurture gratitude, it ratchets down ego and a feeling of entitlement. But even underpinning all of that is just this fear that we're not going to have enough. I might not have enough. Okay, I come in, the floor's wet. All right, if the floors are ruined, are we going to have to pull up? Will we have to get new floor? What'll happen then? Do we have enough money? Is it enough? It's like nonsense. It's nonsense stuff. And so gratitude sort of holds everything into perspective for me. And when I get too busy or I get too tired, or actually when I hang too much around people for whom nothing is ever enough, I can start to feel really, my own soul can get sort of, I feel like I'm allowing things to chip away at it. So being grateful often makes me a better listener because I got nothing to prove. Everything's fine. I can just listen and not be right. I can just be curious and say, wow, what else does this person have to say? What else is true for them? How interesting. Because I've got nothing to compete with. There's nothing to prove. And so I could be grateful and then I'm happy. So it's kind of a beautiful circle. That's only when I am able to be aware of it. Because I can get pissy. I can go from zero to pissy very, very quickly. The thing that I'm grateful about is that I seem to be better at recognizing when it happens and pulling it back in. And I think that maybe that's just the human condition. I mean, we're not all walking around, even Mother Teresa had real demons. I would take my mother over Mother Teresa any day. My mother was an otherworldly being. So, and I think that is one of the things I'm the most grateful for, that I was raised by that saint of a woman.
And I love how you tied it together, that being grateful makes you better listening. You said the word ego. And as you were talking about being grateful, I was thinking to myself, is that the connection, that you let go of ego so you're grateful, you let go of ego so you listen?
Yeah. Yep.
So what has this done to you personally? You used to think you were a great listener, and then you learned that you were not that great of a listener, and you learned to become that. How has that affected? What has that done for you?
I would say a few things, just in very practical ways. I mean, it got me and my husband through our daughter's teen years, which had a couple pretty trying things in there that I don't really want to go into, but it helped a lot. It's made my marriage better. I listen. I think it's made me a better reporter because I'm listening more. I'm listening differently. My father is elderly. He'll be 89 in a month or so. And he's had some off and on, age-related infirmities, but they're serious in that, he's very old and frail. So when certain things happen, he doesn't have the resources to bounce back from it. And sometimes it can be difficult to listen to him for reasons also that I don't want to get into here. But instead of trying to talk him out of his mood and talk him out of what is his reality, I'll say, oh, you sound really tired, or you sound really fed up, Dad. I'm so sorry you're going through this. Instead of saying, Dad, if you just looked at it differently, instead of trying to fix him or change him, because that's when I listen badly, it's because I have this agenda. I want to fix someone. I want to change them. What they're saying somehow isn't acceptable to me, so I would like to change what they've said. And so my relationship with him has just calmed way, 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 way down. We had a bit of a problematic relationship growing up, and I love my dad. I love him. But, the father of 9 kids, a lot of parenting is about crowd control and discipline. And he's a very feisty, he's a character. He's a character. And we would butt heads a lot. And I just go, I'm sorry. You sound really tired. That you must be so frustrated. I hear your frustration. If there's anything I can do, let me know. And, no wonder your back hurts after what you went through, and it's changed my relationship with him. I mean, so when I'm with him, I don't just feel this hair pulling frustration. And then I can say, gosh, I can't believe it. I've gotten to this age and I still have my father. I'd say 80% of my friends have lost both parents by now. And I still have a dad. Like, that's crazy. I'm 58 years old and I still have a dad who's here. Okay, I'll take it. I'll take it. And then I get grateful again. I'm like, wow, I got to come full circle with this man. Like, I know, when my sister died, she left two sons. Her sons were 17 and 16. And, it just breaks my heart that they weren't able to go, to grow into adulthood, having my sister around, and, I lost my mom at 50, which there was nothing left unsaid at all. 58, my dad's here. It's all good. Like, what a privilege to just have lived this long and come full circle. Because then, so now at this point with my dad, like, I feel like the only thing left is the love. That's all that's left now. There's no axe to grind anymore. There's nothing to prove. There's just love. That's all that's left. And I knew when my mom died, I just felt like it was such a privilege to have, she was 84. And the only thing left was the love. She had Alzheimer's Alzheimer's. Well, she had dementia. I don't know if it was ever given an exact name, but she still knew our names, which was lovely. And she repeated herself and stuff. And she was just reduced to nothing but this puddle of love. And, wow, so I feel grateful for that. So when I'm with my dad, I'm like, look, you still have him, just, what you say? You say, thank you. You look at the sky, you don't shake your fist, you go, thank you. And sometimes I'm definitely talking myself off a ledge. I'm like, all right, Ronnie, remember, grateful. And I'm like, all right, grateful. Okay, so here I thought I had a day off, but I got a phone call. I got to go up there and deal with it. Okay. And on the way, I'm like, all right, God, keep me grateful today, because I'm feeling just a little pissy that my day's not going to go the way I wanted it to. And then I'm like, okay, I guess I'm supposed to spend the afternoon with my dad. Okay. So gratefulness and happiness, I think, are two ends of the same stick. I really do. I think that you can't be happy. For me, I'll speak for myself. I can't really be happy unless, usually if I'm happy, there's some essence, there's some gratitude present. And when I'm grateful, that puts me in a state of happiness. And I think we've been so, society right now has so cheated us out of what happiness is. There's this, we think happiness is this like instant gratification. It's about sort of having every single thing we ever thought we needed. It's about feeling no dissatisfaction ever. It's about getting what's ours. And even if it's not stated, there's just something in like the ads we see and the billboards and the rhetoric and the, if we're too understanding with people who are poor or refugees or people we don't understand, then I may not get mine. I may not get mine. And that's out there, that's just kind of out there. I know for me, like it's not good for my heart or my soul, but I can get as caught up in it as anybody. And then when that happens, like I said, I think I'm just getting better going, wow, I am really in a bad place. What's going on? And then I'll either talk with my husband or I'll pick up the phone. I just have the most lovely friends, and I'll call them up and go, okay, I am really out on a ledge. Can I just bitch and moan a little bit? And I bitch and moan, and then eventually I get back to some equilibrium again. So
you're talking about society and how we're being cheated into believing what's happiness because we expect, we demand. Do you think, are you hopeful about the future in that respect, or do you think we're going down a dark path?
I'm always hopeful. I mean, I'm always hopeful, because to not be hopeful means that I think I know everything and I know how things are going to turn out. And I've been surprised many times in my life that I just go, what do I know? I know nothing. Having said that, I am really, really worried about the new administration in the White House and sort of the level contempt and fear, that I sort of like a wave of it that I think lifted him into the White House. And I just think we're so much better than that. But if enough people don't know it, or if people in power don't know it and they come from this other place, it makes me really worried. I mean, that does make me worried, So, and I know that it's a thing that we're struggling with as journalists too. It's like, well, how much do we cover all of this? I mean, like, it just seems like it's been such a shift that to cover it all the time means that maybe we're not covering just some other great stories that are going on in Philly that have nothing to do with that, So I feel like it's thrown a curveball. And I don't think that's just like blind worry. I mean, one of the top advisors to the new president is basically saying, I can see us going to war. I mean, those are like fighting words there's a lot of unstable people out there in the world who are just waiting to hear that. And I'm thinking, where's the comportment? What are we doing here? So I feel worried. I do feel worried. I feel hopeful about humanity because I just know too many wonderful people to not feel hopeful. But the choices that are being made by people in power, so many of whom we have more super, super, super wealthy elected leaders in this country than ever before. And I feel like there's been this kind of remove from a lot of people who haven't been that fortunate. And I don't know, there's some disconnect, like we may not get ours. And it's coming, so much of it is coming from people who have so much. The administration, it's also new. As we speak right now, it's been 2 weeks since, it's been 13 days since the inauguration. So it's a little soon to say anything other than I think my head's spinning.
But in a way, I feel regardless, you're still listening. I remember when we first started talking, you had a project where you spoke people on both sides and you just listened to what they had to say. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us a little bit about that, that listening to both sides and what that has done to you?
Yeah. So, okay. So, a few weeks before the election in November, the rhetoric between the two candidates had gotten so heated, so terrible. And there were, you talk to people and say, for the first time in my life, I am unfriending people on Facebook. I'm not talking to family. This one friend of mine, she said, I think of people who I love and I feel like I don't like them anymore. And I hate feeling this way. Like there just seemed to be this miserable thing going on. And so, I talked to two editors at work who were just great. The managing editor, Michelle Bjork, she said, I know that there's some newsrooms are doing some things around empathy and I said, well, you know what I think? I said, what if we got 24 voters, future voters together, people who wanted Hillary Clinton and people who wanted Donald Trump. And what if we got them all in one room just to see if they could talk to each other? I said, because the election's November 8th. On November 9th, half the country maybe is going to be very, very unhappy. So, and we don't know who that's going to be, but we'd like to say, okay, if your candidate wins, what are you willing to do to reach out to the others? Or if your candidate loses, what are you doing? Whatever. So like it kind of began like that. It was a little, I think we were sort of looking a little bit at, okay, the issues and things like that. But so I just wrote a column and said, I'm calling on, 24 pissed off and jaded voters. We need you. So anyway, we ended up with 19. We had 24, but, something came up for 2 people. The set to strike happened that day, so people couldn't get down. It snowed. And but people came, and some of them came with like notes because they thought, all right, this is my chance to sort of make the case of why this candidate is better. And we didn't ask a single thing about either candidate. A friend of mine, her name is Sharon Browning, has got anyone who listens to this might want to look it up. It's called justlistening.net. So she has a blog about listening and she trains people in how to listen. And so I said to her, would you help us come up with some activity? And so we decided that what we what we're going to do is everyone comes into this room. We broke everybody down into groups of 3. And then we just ask questions and ask them to think about the question, share their answers with the group, with their little group that share it with the big group. And the questions we asked were, why are you here this evening? We asked, what are your dreams for the person in your life you love the most? I'm kind of paraphrasing these questions. It's been a little while. What do you think are the most important, as an American, what American value do you cherish the most? As an American, and we kept it on these broader questions about what do we value? Who do we love? What do we care about? And some people who came in so stiff and anxious, and that they came in ready to have a big political argument, they're like leaning into each other and they're talking and everyone is laughing. And they were all walks of life. They were straight, they were gay, they were Black, Latina, Asian, and white, Democrats, Republicans. I worked like a dog to try to get the group as representative as I possibly could in the 1 week's time that we decided to do this, or whatever, 2 weeks' time. By the end of the night, people were hugging each other. They were like, oh, I have to friend you on Facebook. They all wanted to take selfies with each other because they spoke about the things that actually we share. And we didn't really know how it was going to go. There was this one guy who came, very, very conservative, former military, and he said, this is not at all what I expected. He said, I was boning up on Trump's policies. I was ready to do all this. And he said, this was an amazing exercise, even in civics. He said, I still don't know how half these people are voting, but gosh, they are wonderful people. So everyone was sort of undemonized by just this process of listening to each other and sharing. But the questions were very pointed. So the questions were formed in such a way that we're talking about, well, what are shared values? And people came up with, well, the best thing about being American is we have a generosity of spirit. There is an openness. There's a fairness. What are the things I want for people I love the most? I want them to be happy. I want them to feel fulfilled. And we found, everyone's like, oh my God, we want the same things with the people we love. We all cherish the same things about being American. What I think we disagree with are the ways to get there. Do those disagreements have to be something that totally cuts us off from each other? And I think people left thinking, okay, this is why compromise is good. This is why we must talk to each other and work to make compromises, because we may differ in how to get there, but we all want the same things. But I think that what has characterized a lot of the rhetoric is that, no, there's no giving at all. There can be no giving. And I put myself in that camp. I mean, there are some very basic fundamental beliefs I have about, certain rights that I think are just fundamental rights, fundamental. And I am really worried that those rights will be dismantled in this new administration. And it's really hard for me to say, well, but, everybody wants the same things, where I think, well, no, I think this may lead back to a level of oppression that I think is immoral. And I feel like even though this country has definitely had episodes of being immoral, slavery, civil rights, we needed a civil rights movement because people didn't have rights, we needed the Supreme Court to say, of course, gay people may marry. I mean, women should have a right to choose. And I worry about that. So that is a thing that I think maybe if we're talking about hope, I feel very worried about that, because I do think that I believe that what it is to be American is that fundamental rights are extended to all of us as a birthright. And I'm worried that is not shared by enough people with enough of the power. So, but now we're going down a path of not what makes me happy, but what makes me fearful. So, but it's there,
And I think in a way your experience with the voters that didn't know who each other was voting for circles back to what you were saying before. When you stop trying to win or lose You just listen.
Yeah.
And you just, you get let go of the ego, and we realize that we're more alike than we think we are.
Yes. And I think that's the only way a civilized society can live. I mean, we no longer, in this country, we used to study civics, and that was a topic in schools. I think they stopped teaching it by the time I got to high school. But civics, how to comport yourself in a civil society, how to behave with respect and decency, and, what are your responsibilities as a civilian? Civics, well, you vote. You should become involved and engaged in your community. You will respect others. And we've gotten away from that. It's so far away that I don't even think people know what civics means anymore. I think the people who do know are aging, dead, or dying, So I think when those voters came and it was like a practice in civics, it was thrilling. And people really, oh my God, people were crying. You had people crying. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. There was this one young woman who was just terrific. She's African-American. I think she's 30 or 31. And she's not been able to get a job in a field that she likes. And she was just speaking from the heart. And she said, I really worry about that I may not have the American dream. She said, when I get turned down for a job, I don't know if is it because I'm female? Is it because I'm Black? Is it because there's nothing out there? But in the meantime, I've got this debt because I got the college degree to try to give myself a shot. And now I'm saddled with this debt and I can't get a job. And this one older guy who was there, the one who was very conservative, he said, I used to think that young people were just whining. It's like, come on, get out there and get a job. And he's like, she's lovely. She's really smart. And look, he's this older military white American. He walks into a room. No one wonders about his fitness for different kinds of things. Well, maybe some people do. I'm not going to make a blanket statement there. But he said, I think I'm going to listen to young people differently. I really heard that. It never occurred to me how worried they must be. If we're in our silos for long enough, if we can't imagine it, then we think it must not exist. So I think that's why it's so important to listen and hear each other, because we really can't imagine everything. And so if we can really hear it, we can go, wow, no, there's something that I never thought about. And I think it keeps the civilization civilized.
Okay, Ronnie, I want to move on to the rapid fire section. I have a few quick questions about what makes you happy, and I would just want to get your gut reaction. Are you ready for that?
Okay.
Who makes you happy?
My daughter.
Do you have a happy color?
Blue.
What is the happiest moment you can think of?
Birth of my daughter.
Who is the happiest person you can think of?
My Aunt Betty.
And is there a happy word you can think of?
Joy.
And then this one I just love throwing in. What is the first happy moment you can think of?
First happy? Oh, like earliest happy memory?
Mm-hmm.
When my little brother was born.
How old were you?
I was 5. I know I have happy memories, but that's when I just know where I was. My mother had a son and then 4 girls, and then she was pregnant again. And we were all like, we want a brother, we want a brother, we want a brother. And I remember I was standing on the corner waiting for my kindergarten bus to pick me up. And my grandmother had been taking care of us. And the bus stop was like 2 houses down from the house. And she ran out of the house and she said, your mother had a boy. And I just about burst. And I just remember that all the time. Of course, my mother went on to have 2 more girls and yet another boy. But at that moment, it's like she broke the girl thing. We were like, we want a little boy. So I remember that. I just remember being on that corner and finding out that Michael was born.
Such happy memories. Ronnie, if people want to learn more about you or find about your work, where can they do that?
Sure. If they want to read my columns, they can go to philly.com/Ronnie. and my stuff should just be sort of archived there in chronological order. If they want to watch my TED Talk, they could just go to YouTube and just put in my name, Ronnie Polaneczky. That is never easy to spell. Or they could say the power of deliberate listening, and my TED Talk will pop up. I'm on Twitter as Ronnie Philly. And if they want to email me at work, it's right on just click on any column that you find of mine, and my contact info is right there.
And we'll make sure to include all those links so people can find them. Ronnie, I'm so happy we had this conversation. We made it happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I really appreciate your mission. I really do. And it's just been lovely to speak with you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ronnie, for sharing what makes you happy. And thanks everyone for listening. A special thanks to Jason Zappolo for editing this episode, Orly Margulis for help with social media, and Rocio Castañeda for ongoing support. Please go to thehappypodcast.com for show episodes and show notes, and find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at The Happy Podcast, and on YouTube, youtube.com/thehappypodcast. Please follow us on iTunes for weekly updates and give us a 5-star review for others to find us. Thank you, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.